So this is kind of a provocative topic, like stuff's changing, what do we do about it? We've got a couple experts here who have lived through a bunch of ups and downs. I think sort of the interesting backdrop for this whole discussion is the fact that for anyone in the room who's been an operator in e-commerce, things have never not gone up into the right, in a sense. For the last 20 years, it sort of felt like that's all that's happened. And suddenly it does feel like the world has changed. But many folks in the industry, probably some of you and certainly folks on your teams, haven't lived through a downturn before. And so what does that mean? What does it look like? What do we do about it? Or are we even really in one? So let me start with kind of that question. Daren, why don't we start with you? Over the last year, think about the business you were in until recently. How's the economy, what's happened in the environment impacted the business, and any learnings from the first quarter of this year that kind of influence your thinking?
Yeah, I think a big piece is reversion to the mean. So one of the things we haven't seen in this period of time is something like COVID that shut down so many physical stores. So e-commerce was such a big piece of what businesses were doing. You had quite a bit of that stick, but we've also seen as stores reopened, the conversation, you saw Lululemon is trying to divest of the mirror because when gyms reopened, people wanted to go back to the gym in person. When shopping is happening, people want to go back to stores. So I think we're seeing a lot of reversion to mean for customers, customer groups that were spending a lot of money in the past. Some of that savings is gone. So just all across the board, things reverting to the mean. So I think you're probably far ahead of where you were before COVID, but definitely not been a straight line, especially in Q1 where retail contracted.
Yep, fair point. Melissa, how about in your business?
Yeah, so with us, we are a little bit of an oddball because we are sort of bucking the trend. We're continuing to grow. Last year, we made over $500 million. In Q4, we hit that very important adjusted EBITDA positivity number. So we've really sort of continued to grow. But what I would say Q1 taught us and taught everybody, I think, is you would never have expected your bank to suddenly go away, right? Like, whether you were impacted by the SVB demise or not, it's a really good wake-up call to start to understand, okay, well, what are other single points of failure inside of your businesses that you might not have thought of before? Like, I mean, banks are banks. You never expect them to go away. So you don't even have like 2 banks as a backup, but do you have 2 payment processors? Do you have, 2 other things that you're relying on? And so I think it's a really good opportunity to take this time and go through all of those things inside of your business to de-risk.
Good point. Well, let's talk about this time and what this time really means. Daren, so you've been at this a while in various capacities. You've probably lived through the ups and downs of the bubble bursting in 2000, 2001. And you certainly lived through, as an operator, the great financial crisis in 2009. What's the same? What's different now?
Yeah, I think for those who haven't, being around a long time just means you're getting older. I think in 2000, one of the things that was a big difference is you're really on the heels of people saying e-commerce was a fad and it was going to go away. So most the e-commerce teams were running as tangential, either sales or marketing organizations. And I think you in a very real way, thought that you would come in and lose your job and your whole team would be gone. In 2008, when there were a lot of financial friction, I think there was really a call to question whether the economic model worked for e-commerce businesses. So I think as it comes to 2022, 2023, I would say on the good side, most people have played a significant role in the retail organization with e-commerce, have probably more visibility to the C-suite and a lot more two-way conversation. All of that's good. On the backside of it, you've had marketing costs have skyrocketed. People are starting to really criticize your cost per acquisition, things like that. So I think it's more like 2008 where people are going to look at the unit economics and start calling into question some of your practices. And that's understandable if you think about it. When it was COVID, things were all going up and to the right, and you were running around with your hair on fire. I think if you take a big step back from this situation and understand from a businesses all go through these periods of expansion and contraction. This is just a moment of contraction, and you need to understand culturally that's where you need to start thinking about all those things I did in a rush. Can I do those better? Can I be more efficient? These sorts of questions, and then be prepared and have money ready. The people who win in bad times are the people who really align and get ready to deploy money when it looks like things are turning around.
Good lesson there. Melissa, how about hims and hers? I mean, you guys haven't faced headwinds to the same extent as many e-commerce businesses, as you point out. But certainly, I imagine if you think back to 2018 and then think about what's unfolded over the last 4 years, a lot that was unpredictable did happen.
Oh,
so
sure.
What's that been like? What's the ride been like, and what have you learned?
I mean, it's been wild. We've all had a wild one during COVID, right? And I mean, when we started this business 5 years ago, we expected to have to spend so much money educating the consumer on what telehealth even was, like that it was legal, that it was high quality, all of those things. And COVID was awful, and we all wish it wouldn't have happened, but what it did do is actually accelerated that conversation by at least 10 years and all of that adoption, and people started realizing how much time they were spending on the traditional healthcare system, taking 3 hours off work, going to the doctor, you sit in that little room, you sit in that other little room, right? It takes so long to see someone, and you might wait weeks and weeks to even get in, whereas on the telehealth platform, we're answering people in under 30 minutes, right? And so I think that adoption made us have to adapt very quickly because we needed to fulfill on our promise so much faster than we thought we were going to have to. Like, we were always building it, but we had to grow on like stopgap photography. Like, it had to like really accelerate. And so, we did things like launched primary care services in less than a week and, really tried to like take some weight off of the healthcare system. And in doing that, really shored up some of our quality, our, ability to get patients seen very quickly, how they get routed to the providers that they get routed to. And so like the changes, while they're challenging, like if they don't kill you, it makes you a lot stronger, right? Because you end up in a better place. Now we're always thinking about, okay, well, what are we going to have to adapt to? How would we handle a situation if something, happens good or bad, right?
I have an interesting anecdote on that sort of responding to the moment and using it as an opportunity, or with no choice, just taking the opportunity to like reinforce what you need to make the business better. There's a large-scale, mostly brick-and-mortar retailer that Bain Capital owned when COVID hit, and that company had spent probably 5 years in various conference rooms and pilots debating curbside pickup and testing and thinking and debating and testing and thinking and debating. And COVID hit, and in a week they had it launched across the chain. And it wasn't perfect. It was like definitely minimum viable product, but it worked. And it became a fundamental part of the business that exists to this day. And I thought it was such a good example of how, no good crisis should be wasted. Like, it forced a company to be more nimble and rally around stuff that just had to get done versus trying to get to perfect before making a decision.
That's right. And how much navel gazing was there? Like, how much time did you spend thinking through what curbside delivery would even be like, and should we launch it, and all of that? When you have to, you have to.
Yeah, I mean, I will, just as a lesson, having been an entrepreneur and working with lots of startups, I do happen to love the ready, fire, aim philosophy of many entrepreneurs. And I do think this industry broadly could benefit from more of that inspiration. Let's talk about that for a minute.
I was going to say, I think one of the best things about when you work in a startup is you feel like every decision is existential, that you won't make payroll if you don't figure out how to get it done.
Yep.
And I thought it was really interesting in the time of COVID, bigger companies were starting to act like that. And we've seen it really, I personally have seen it just from the types of questions I get from people, seen it really revert back over time, which I think is a shame.
So let's talk about that and the implications on this current environment where traditional marketing spend, just as an example, doesn't seem to work the way it did a year ago. And while we can all look back at the data and say, well, it was increasingly working less and less well, suddenly a lot of the stuff that everyone relied on doesn't work at all. The economics don't make sense. So therefore what? What should people be doing?
I mean, you guys have a big TV campaign and stuff like that, but I would say practical advice to take away. I've spent a long time with marketing and customer marketing, worked at Cuthy Ranker, who I think buys more TV than anybody in the country. And one of the things I really learned there is you want to diversify your media. So part of the challenge is if 90% of your customer acquisition was coming from Facebook and Instagram and those prices go up by 90%, you're in a really tough spot. So I think one is really focus on diversification of where you're getting your customers from. I think second is you really need to start working at your kind of base level understanding of what incrementality in marketing is. It's very difficult math. I think there are tools now, I hope I don't miss somebody who's in the hallway, but like the Lift Labs and the Northbeam and Measured and folks like that will help you doing kind of channel level media mix modeling. You can do that, or if you don't have the scale to pull that off, I always send people back to Avinash Kaushik, who has been doing web analytics forever. He has some good articles on how to fake that math yourself. So if you're going through this mechanism, you have to understand you're joined to an entire company. If physical store traffic is down, customer acquisition will be down, which will cause people to come looking for a way to stabilize profitability. So they may come to cut your marketing spend. You should start tiering out your spend on like, what's the green light stuff that we can't let go of? What's the yellow light stuff that's middle ground, really helps with acquiring new customers or other goals that you have? And then the red light stuff, which is, listen, if I get a gun put to my head to have to pull money out, be proactive with that. Talk with your CFOs, talk with people, because whatever solution somebody else who doesn't understand your business comes up with will not be as good as the one you would come up with yourself.
Good points. Melissa, how about you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we had this struggle actually early on. You can't use healthcare data for marketing purposes. And so imagine all retargeting that everybody does. You can't do that with people that come to the website. So we had to figure out creative ways of doing marketing just in general. And so, you know, it's gotten more sophisticated over time, but in those early days, we sort of had a target of 15% of the marketing budget, no more than, should go into any one thing. Right? So only 15% of our marketing budget was going into Facebook, only 15% here. And not only does it help you diversify and test and learn really, really fast, because you might put something in, something, realize it's not going to work and pull it out quickly. It also helps de-risk your marketing a lot, because if Facebook changes their algorithm, we've all heard those stories and dealt with that. Suddenly, it doesn't mean your business is falling off a cliff. It just means you got to like readjust that other like bit of it. And I think that it's going to force everybody to do the hard work of, just because it's not a direct result, you can't look at a dashboard, a Facebook dashboard, and see the results of your direct spend. You're going to have to do the work of actually thinking through, okay, well, how does the brand spend put wind at the back of all of the direct spend, right? So we're in retailers for this purpose, right? Retailers are a place on the shelf. People see us. It's another touch point. You can think of it as like a marketing billboard that just happens to be profitable for us. Like, what are some other ways that you can reach your customers that take pressure off of the direct brand, just one for $1?
I want to underscore some, and maybe I'll invert it and be more pessimistic so that it sticks, is the biggest mistake that I've seen people make repeatedly as you go through these cycles is people optimize purely for ROAS, and you'll just cut, and you cut off the new customer acquisition channels really, really violently and quickly. And then it becomes a game of just trying to get wallet share from the people that you have. But back to Brendan's, I'm going to tie it together with what Brendan said, where he said, your watch should still tell time, right? Your watch should still be a watch. What is marketing supposed to do? And marketing should be bringing new customers in. And I think if you look at your total digital marketing budget and you start falling below, say, 10% in upper funnel tactics, that should make some sirens go off in your head, and you should be thinking of how that impacts everything that you do day to day.
And let's assume people try hard to do all the smart things you guys are talking about, but then it looks like TikTok really works well, or retail media networks are suddenly the path to victory. Shouldn't they just pile into those?
So I think when we were doing prep for this, I made a joke that Scott Galloway used to do this whole presentation on Red Envelope versus Blue Nile, where he said Blue Nile went all in on Google. Google got big, so Blue Nile won. I think it's going to be an art adjustment on everybody's brand. I think it's like gambling. You want to, you know, if you're playing blackjack, you want to, if you have good cards, you want as much money on the table as you can. And so one of the things that I see people also is they'll hit budget caps and these sorts of things even when the numbers look really good. Even if you're going to be held to a total numbers budget, like what's the old phrase? You make hay while the sun's shining, right? There's a lot of ways that you can acquire customers and then work them through first-party data, emails, texts, these sorts of things. So when it's working, take the opportunity to take it working and figure out how to manage that as a portfolio.
What's your view, Melissa?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's always ways to test what the ceiling of a particular channel will be as well. So like just because you spent a certain amount one month doesn't mean that maybe the next month you want to test it to see how far it could really go. And so then you know where your ceiling is. But I would say that the other thing is you're going to want to test it and then wait a little bit because you want to see what kind of customers those even are. Like, are they getting the experience that they think they're going to get? Are they churning off the platform? Do they repeat? Like that takes a while to analyze too. So you can hedge your bets a little bit until you really figure out how valuable those customers are on an LTV basis. And then if they're extra valuable there, then plow some more money into it for sure.
Well, what do you guys think in particular about retail media networks? I mean, it seems like there's been, with these ATT changes, suddenly other channels that operate very differently than traditional digital marketing channels are in vogue kind of again. And is that a durable thing, or do you think that's a thing of the moment?
I think Meta raising their rates and Google raising their rates inside of black boxes forced the retail networks to look more attractive. I think one of the challenges there is a lack of the customer information. So you have to do the calculation of what's that's worth in reverse. But I think it's another tactic for diversification. And I didn't say it earlier, but I think the second half of this year is going to be very difficult, and you should be looking at this time over the summer. I haven't worked at a business where like June is the biggest month. This is your opportunity to do test markets, whether you're talking about, comparing a Denver to a Minneapolis and just really oversaturate one media type so that you can do a rough control. You don't have to be perfect. Census data will kind of work a little bit. The other one is start turning things on and off, and retail network would be a really good one. Take this opportunity in the June, July time period, because if there are economic challenges in the back part of this year, you're going to be asked to cut spend into the face of some of your big build months, and you're going to want to have the math that you can do to execute that. So your cost to do that testing right now is relatively low. But retail network should definitely be something that you're trying, but do the reverse math that you're not going to have the name in the email file or the text file.
You agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think you have to take advantage of whatever is popular at the moment to do a lot of testing. We actually have split our budget where we have a marketing budget and then we have an actual just experimentation budget for the marketing team to just try things. And so that's how we end up, with huge posters in Giant Stadium and stuff like that, just to see if that works. That's super important, but I also would remember that getting people into your store, e-com store, regular store, that's part of it, but also making sure they have an incredible experience, because that gives organic your wind, right? Because if they have an incredible experience, they're going to tell somebody else, and then that's going to drive people too. So I actually think organic marketing right now and thinking about how you drive organic marketing and increasing it is probably one of the most important things you can think about right now. And that all comes from really strong brand, really strong customer experience, and them actually being happy with with the product that you have, right? You don't walk into an Apple store because it's cool. You walk into an Apple store because their products work and it's cool, right? Like they have the whole package.
There's a lot of talk in a lot of different panels today, including the one that I was on earlier around, and including this one now, around data and analytics and the use of data to figure out all these questions. And that sort of bleeds into this concept of where we're at in the current instantiation of AI, broadly around data and granular understanding of the business, and maybe even where this next generation of AI is headed. Any thoughts on the kind of skills in the organization and, ways you're thinking about how those skills need to evolve over time?
I think we've been hearing this reoccurring theme that's coming up. I think anybody who is in on the early days of digital can feel the same wave come in behind AI. I think it's not as easy. We had this as a conversation. It's not as easy a box. When digital came in, it was really a kind of sales and marketing function. It was okay to run it as sort of a separate team and let it build itself up. I think AI is going to touch lots of different areas. Where we've seen a lot of success is, putting a CDP in and having it really do the work for lookalike modeling and to really feed a DMP that's doing automated buying for you. If you have a broad product assortment, that's great because you can say they're people and their stuff, and I'm trying to marry them together. A company like Vera Bradley, the average unit retail isn't as high as somebody you might be competing with, like one of the Tapestry or Capri brands. So there are going to be big demand periods that you can't bid up that ladder, but if you can sell a robe or a slipper, that's still an acquired customer. I think the step towards one-to-one marketing, really one-to-one marketing has been product recommendations. That's the only thing that's been automated really in dose. That's hyperbole, I understand. But where you've always run into problems is you could get to like one to few by grouping people together conversations. I think with generative AI, really the choke point has been the content creation piece. And I'm excited to see how that evolves because I think we might get to, I've been hearing one-to-one marketing talked about for like 25 years, and I still haven't seen it pulled off in a right way. And I think we're getting to the point that the compute is getting fast enough that when I'm looking at a website, I can be without authentication identified and then content served up to me fast enough in that 2 or 3 minute window. I think we're really close to seeing real breakthroughs there.
Melissa, what's your view on all this?
Yeah, I mean, the AI is so exciting. If you haven't downloaded ChatGPT-4 and played with it, I highly suggest you do. It's so addictive and amazing. And it's getting better so quickly. And this is a really exciting time because that is going to blow the doors off of things. And there's so many applications across so many facets. So yes, the marketing one for sure. All of the manual time you spend on things. So we're already testing using it for writing engineering documentation. So every time we launch a feature, the engineers use ChatGPT to write the documentation for them. They check it through, and then they're done. And engineers hate documentation, so it's perfect. And they can spend their time actually coding and doing something more valuable. Then there's also service implications, customer service, and how could they just chat with an AI bot instead of an actual human. And as we're trying to optimize our costs, because we have to make all those dollars work for marketing really hard, where are all the places across the business that we can leverage it? We are medical, right? So we're a healthcare platform. The applications to healthcare are astounding. When you think about all of the speed of innovation in medicine just in general. And then if you have all of that information, it's more than any one brain can really contain. Even a gifted provider doesn't know all of that information. There's just no way. And so with AI, we could potentially aggregate all of the medical information together in order to either, suggest what the right treatment plan would be to a provider, or highlight something that they might not have thought of or they aren't an expert in. And that's just going to make patient care that much better and more high quality. And so we're not there yet. And I don't know exactly what it looks like when we do get there, but it's really exciting. And I think that the companies that adopt it in the right ways going forward and embrace it are going to be the ones that win.
It's interesting to hear you so forward-leaning on this topic, given that you're in a business where the stakes are high, and I would imagine the level of scrutiny around getting stuff right, particularly stuff you recommend that's healthcare related to a consumer, is extremely high and regulated.
Mm-hmm.
And so how are you guys thinking about guardrails around all this stuff?
Oh, I mean, we're constantly thinking about guardrails. I mean, the stakes are incredibly high. Humans also make mistakes, right? So the combination of the human and the machine together is probably the key for the short term, at least until AI gets even better and, it's trusted explicitly. So I feel like as long as you have high integrity and a pragmatic approach to how you integrate it and make sure that, humans are doing the things that humans need to do and machines are doing the things that they can do, I think you're going to be okay.
I think any place where you have that legal and regulation is one of the areas I'm excited, because if you think of some of these repetitive tasks, but they require this granular kind of construct of, what you can and can't do. Like I think of things like, as dumb as they are, everybody has probably sat down to write an RFP and you sit there and you're like, ugh. It's like your least favorite thing that you want to do. But you could have AI could crank like the first draft of that RFP out and do it in multiple languages, multiple currencies, multiple measures, all that sort of stuff in a super cool way. I think that's where anything where you can tune and train the engine to kind of stay within these boundaries is going to be a super big win.
Well, in fact, while we spent a bunch of time coming up with questions that we thought were relevant for this panel, did you do this, Melissa? Who did this? Maybe
no, I don't.
Someone on the Signifyd team just put into ChatGPT the topic for the panel and asked for questions. And we got a set of questions that were actually at least as good as the ones we had come up with on our own. So here's one of them, written by ChatGPT. What emerging technologies do you think will have the biggest impact on the industry? And we can't talk about AI because we just talked about that. But honestly, what other stuff are you guys seeing in the businesses you've been operating in that you think are, sort of have important implications or real benefit beyond just the vendor sort of claims of ROI?
Yeah, I mean, I think the distance that one engineer can go is so much greater than it used to be. So I feel like there was always this build versus buy conversation. And I think that the build over the buy is easier than it ever has been, because you don't need quite as many engineers to build like this little thing when you can have a few build this enormous thing. So I think that that's going to be really interesting, because people are going to start building their own tools for things. We had to build our own medical records platform because back when we started, like I said, nobody even knew telehealth existed or was a real thing. All the medical platforms were built for brick and mortar and insurance billing and all the things that we weren't going to do. So we had to build it ourselves. And just what we could do back then with 2 engineers and, some code, it was pretty astounding. So I think there's going to be a lot of proprietary stacks start to come up, and that's going to really diversify the personalization that you get within a company. So because we did it the way we did it, we're able to keep costs low. The providers are able to deliver the high quality care, and we're able to operate and execute in a really cost effective way, whereas we wouldn't have if we would have bought it. So I'm kind of, the engineering tools themselves are actually kind of exciting, because I think you're going to be able to do more with fewer engineers.
So where do you draw that line, though? So this is like a pet peeve topic of mine, because, and I have a biased point of view, but having been a vendor to the retail industry in a prior life, and now being an investor in lots of interesting companies who sell their tools and technologies to retail operators of various types, the benefit that vendors have, if they're relatively mature, is that they work with lots and lots and lots of companies. And they get all those reps, and they get to improve their code as a result of all those reps, and they have pattern recognition that no individual operator has. Mm-hmm. And so this build versus buy thing can be decided in terms of, can we build it? But I think there's this question of, should we build it? And where do you draw that line?
Oh, 100%. I think the should we is more along, you have to figure out what your core competencies are as a company, right? I would never build my own fraud system. I'm going to let Signifyd do that for me, right? Because I don't want to be a fraud company. But I will build our medical records platform because, number one, nothing exists on the market that's really going to work for my business. And number two, it is a core competency of what our business delivers as a service. And so when it comes to the should you, I think there needs to be a reason, not just a because we can.
I think there's an interesting, I'm going to take us on a tangent here. One of the big things that happened in 2008 was a lot of people lost their jobs, just like we're seeing now. A lot of people are losing their jobs. That redistribution of engineering talent in particular caused a lot of very interesting things to occur. And I think that's going to be, so I think on the vendor side, it's very difficult for a brand, a retail brand, to have the engineering team that a software company can have. And I think even with AI tools and all those sorts of things, like still culturally, it's going to be a better place for the engineer to work. But I think as we have this distribution of talent at a time where we're seeing the technical innovation, I think we are yet to see in a year or 2 years, particularly if this is a shallow recession. I think there could be some very interesting kind of combinations that come out of this.
One comment I'll add to the mix on this topic for folks in the room that buy software from vendors, sitting on the board of lots of those companies, it's amazing how much vendors will do if asked to make customers happy and to get the business, win the business, and make sure they keep the business. And I think far too often, customers, folks like you guys, don't ask enough. They ask for the software and they pay an annual fee and then they try to implement it and they see what happens, and of course the vendor cares. But I think this push to get what you really need, even if at times that is specialized or custom in some fashion, I think you'd be surprised at how far you can get on that push. And by the same token, I think the push to pay less is a bad thing to do. That just causes the vendor to sit back and go, I don't know if I can really put all my best resources on this account, versus pay full boat, but make sure you get absolutely everything you need and you get the top people working on your account. I think that's the path to victory.
Yeah, I was going to add to it. I think when we talk about getting back to the basics, and again, tie it back to Brendan's conversation, I started my career working in consulting, and when people ask me, like, what did you learn? I think one of the biggest things, yes, you learn business acumen, you learn how to process map and all those sorts of things. One of the biggest things you learn how to do is frame a problem. And I think 90% of projects that I see failed are because people didn't, at the beginning of the project, take a few moments to actually frame the problem that they're solving. I think when you work with technology vendors, one of the things I ask for is that we have 2 meetings a year that are strategic. I ask that they have their product managers that are present at the meeting. And I ask that my team come prepared with problems in the business that we are trying to solve. Whether they're relevant to that software company or not, I think it's important for people to understand the stresses because they work inside of their silos as well. I think that's a practice. So back to your point, instead of pushing super hard, yes, you should negotiate every contract and dollars are important, all that sort of stuff. But so is helping your vendors understand empathetically the professional pressures that you're under.
Love that.
Yeah, and I just want to make clear, you definitely should hire some vendors for things, 100%. On the other hand, though, you have to be a little careful, right? Because in an economic downturn, they are in that pressure cooker too, right? Sure. So make sure that they are stable, or you have redundancies, or you're not using them for something that is so important like payment processing or something like that, right? Without a safety net, because what's that Warren Buffett quote, like when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. Like some of those people might be, right? And they might run out of funding and go away like that. And you then suddenly find yourself like holding the bag.
Very good advice. Very good advice. Well, I think we are out of time. Maybe we can, the experts here, I'm sure, will be happy to take questions afterwards. And thanks everyone for your attention.